Good morning. I would like to talk a little bit about that part of the CLYMBOL project where we have been developing methods, the toolbox part of the project. Because the basic, or one of the basic assumptions here of the whole project is that whatever you want to do with health claims, whether you regard them as a tool to improve public health, or whether you regard them as a way of adding value to food products and increase sales, in any case, it only works, obviously, if they have an effect on consumer behavior. If they have an effect on consumer choices, if consumer choices are affected by the claims, and that, of course, also has something to do with how consumers interpret those claims. And therefore, in the project, we have this basic threefold approach here to the effects of health claims and symbols on consumers that Sophie already mentioned in the introduction. We are interested in, do consumers understand them, or how do consumers understand them? We are interested in whether they have any effects on consumers' food choice. And with effects on food choice, we mean whether the fact that a product has a health claim or a symbol on it decreases or increases the likelihood of that product will be bought if the consumer shops in that category. And then finally, effects on consumption, which have to do with questions like, does it have an effect on the quantity being consumed? Does it have an effect on purchases of other products than the one which carries a health claim, and so on? And in order to measure these effects, obviously we need some tools. We need some methods that we think are useful for measuring these effects. And this is something that is of interest not only for people like us, scientists who are doing studies on consumer behavior, and in this case here on the effects of health claims and symbols on consumer behavior. Of course, we need such methods, but also after this project has ended, there will be a need to do studies on the effects of health claims and symbols. And it's not only scientists, it's also industry and regulators having that need. Because the regulation says that a health claim needs to be understandable by the average consumer. Therefore, industry will have a need to be able to document that a claim actually is understood as required by the regulation. And of course, anybody in industry working with health claims will be interested in to know, do they actually have an effect on consumer choice, and may also be interested to know whether the use of a certain health claim or symbol has any effect on the overall brand positioning, whether it's compatible with the CSR strategy of the company, and that type of question. And of course, from the regulatory point of view, there is a strong interest in finding out whether health claims or symbols do mislead consumers, and how we possibly can improve the understandability of health claims and symbols. And also from a regulatory point of view, of course, there is an interest in looking at the effects on consumer choices, even though this is not from a sales but from a public health point of view. So we have been looking at methods to measure these three types of effects. And we've been doing three things. We've been looking at which methods are available. And for each of these three questions, there's a large range of methods in the social science toolbox that can potentially be used. Then we've been evaluating these methods. And in evaluating them, we had three groups of criteria. We had the usual scientific quality criteria in terms of reliability and validity. We had some theoretically founded criteria with regard to whether we think these methods address what we know about the way in which consumers process information about products and make choices. And finally, we also had some criteria regarding the usability of these methods in a practical context, their cost, their interpretability, their perceived usefulness by stakeholders, and so on. And based on that, of course, we have some recommendations for stakeholders. And for those methods that we regarded as the most promising, we've been doing some testing in using these methods, and that's also some of the things I will show you. So if you start with the first one here, measuring consumer understanding. The main issue in measuring consumer understanding is that it is what we call a constructive process. Understanding always means that you try to attach meaning to something you see or read based on what you already know. And what you already know differs between people. Many people know what vitamin C is, or at least they think they do. And when they see a claim saying something about vitamin C, people will immediately associate, if I eat this or consume this, drink this, it will strengthen my immune system. And if it strengthens my immune system, I can probably get through the winter without getting a cold. The people attach that meaning to the claim based on previous experience, previous knowledge. They draw inferences, as we say, from the manifest content of the claim. If people know only little, it's a claim about beta-glucan, many people have never heard about what that is, people will struggle much more in attaching a meaning to that particular claim. So understanding is constructive, and therefore, if we want to measure understanding, we need to find a methodology that allows us to look at the inferences, the conclusions that people draw by looking at a particular claim. For that reason, we've been concentrating here on looking at methods which allow us to trace these inferences that people make when they look at a claim. And we have, after going through a whole range of possible methods, singled two out that we thought were particularly promising in analyzing understanding. The one is the CUT method. CUT is an acronym for a consumer understanding test, which was developed by Danone as a company that has been working with health claims. It is a method relatively simple, can be integrated, for example, into online surveys and that type of thing. The health claim is shown in the context in which it would appear in real life, like on the product or in a commercial. And then people are asked two questions, two open questions. The first one, after seeing this pack in commercial, if you tell a friend what this product does, what would you say? And the second question, and if you had to tell a friend how it works, what would you say? Well, people type in their answers, and then there is a coding scheme for analyzing these answers with the aim of categorizing them to which extent they are compatible with the scientific dossier behind the claim or not. And so that was one method. Another method that we looked at is what is called the laddering method. And the laddering method is a technique for eliciting inferences that consumers make from information when they have to make a choice. So it would map, for example, when people say vitamin C, that they make the inference, oh, it strengthens my immune system. But it will also map the second, the third, the fourth level inferences, if there are any, that because it strengthens my immune system, it will have decrease the likelihood of me getting without a cold through the winter. So we've been looking at these two methods here, and we did some testing with these two methods. In Denmark, and as a test material, we worked together with the Meal Partnership in Denmark, and I would like to acknowledge the good cooperation we had with the Meal Partnership, which is a stakeholder cooperation in the food sector in Denmark. They have been working with attempts to improve the understandability of health claims, and they've come up with a number of ideas what could be done. If you take a point of departure in the authorized claim, the claim as authorized by EFSA, then they had a reformulated version, which was reformulated within the boundaries of the guidelines formulated for the reformulation of claims in some European countries. Then there could be some extra information, giving some background information on why the claim works. And it could be possibly combined with a general claim, yes or no. And here we have some examples. For example, we have a beta-glucan and blood glucose claim that would be used either in the authorized as a reformulated version. It could be then, in addition to that, there could be a general claim, which in this case would be it's good for your blood sugar. Because you can say that if it is in addition to the other claim. And then there could be some additional information, which in this case would be about that after a meal the blood sugar goes up and this regulates it, things like that. if we test these types of claims with the cut, this is a type of results we get. Now, the coding is in several steps, and I cannot go through all the details here, but here we have the different versions of the claim, the authorized claim plus the general benefit claim with additional information and so on, the different versions here, and we can here see the frequencies of the type of inferences that people make when they have to explain what the product with a claim on it does. Now, we have safe inferences, we have vague but benefit-related inferences, we have risky inferences, we have vague and not benefit-related inferences. For example, this is good for you, or some very general thing. And some people just sort of restated the claim or restated only that this product contains this or that. And if we take this to one step further, then we can aggregate these results to something like this here, where we categorize respondents in the study into 4 categories, namely safe inferences, that's the green, risky inferences, that's the red, vague inferences or other inferences, that is the blue, and then we have a small one here where people just reformulate the claim without really showing whether they've understood anything. And then, of course, we can see whether the different versions of the claim do make a difference. In this particular case here, we see that if we add the general claim to the authorized claim, then the number of safe inferences goes down and the number of risky ones goes up here. If you then, in addition to that, give some more background information, that is this one here, then we sort of restore the safe inferences here and the risky inferences go down again. And of course, that's not a result that generalizes, but I'm showing you this in order to demonstrate how we can use this methodology to test different versions of a claim against each other in a way so that we can see whether the relative share of risky versus safe versus vague inferences goes up or down. And because in some cases, and this is an example, the sort of well-meant attempt to improve the understandability of the claim may not always work in the way in which you expect. This then here is an example of the other methods, the lettering method. And the lettering method allows us to get more insight into the lines of thought that the claim generates. So here we have again the beta-glucan claim as an example here, and if we go up, we see the line of thinking that we found in respondents, and we see that there are sort of two lines of thoughts that people have when they see this claim on a product. We have the green ones, which are related content-wise to the health effects of the claim, and we have the gray ones here, which are not related to the content of the claim, but more related to the format or to the fact that there is a claim here. Because in this case here, the beta-glucan claim is sort of relatively technical and not very well known to people. We say some people saying the information is too long or detailed, I would not read that label, it's difficult to understand. So people come with some negative reactions to the claim itself, and it also has an impact on the type of content-wise inferences. Of course, we have the implication is good for your health here, but we have also a whole range here of inferences that have something to do with that. Because it's difficult to understand, people don't trust it, are irritated, don't trust the product, don't trust the producer, and that kind of thing. And again, then we can see how that changes when we change the claim. So if we take the authorized claim and now we add the general claim, and the blue ones, those are those that now disappear because we add the general claim. Most of the irritation here that people had at the authorized beta-glucan claim actually disappear. So that we add the general claim, it makes people sort of more comfortable in understanding what this claim is all about. And we still have this line of thinking here about the health effects, but also we get some new, these are the yellow ones, we get some new lines of thought because we add this general claim here. And that also shows why people become more comfortable, because people now think not only it's good for your health, but they also find it more relevant, and they think, aha, this can help me manage everyday tasks and avoid being uncomfortable or irritated. which can show why people, because we add the general claim, become more confident, and maybe for that reason also may come with some inferences which go beyond what the scientific dossier really covers. So as we can see, these two methods, the cut method and the lettering method, they complement each other. For that reason, we also think that both of these methods are useful to be applied in practice. For industry, if you want to document that a claim is understood as required by the regulation, we think the cut method is a good method to use. It leads to relatively clear-cut conclusions about correspondence with the scientific dossier. You can test the claim in a real-world context and that type of thing. Whereas if you're more interested in how a claim, for example, affects the manufacturer brand or is compatible with a CSR possibility, the lettering methods gives much more information about how actually people react to that particular claim. And in a similar way, from a regulatory perspective, if you only want to have sort of the benchmark type of information, is the claim understood or does it mislead consumers? We think the cut methodology is a good method to use. But if you want to know how we can improve the understanding, then of course we need to look in more detail at what kind of inferences people make depending on the version of the claim, and then the lettering method is useful. So that was about measuring consumer understanding. We come to the second one then, measuring the effect of health claims and symbols on consumer food choice. Now, in principle, one could say measuring effects on food choice, that's simple, because that's measured automatically every time somebody buys a product with a health claim. Every time somebody buys a product with a health claim, it says beep, it's a cashier and it's registered. It generates data. And that data we can in principle use to analyze whether the health claim increases or decreases the likelihood of choosing the product, whether the health claim increases or possibly even decreases the price that people are willing to pay for the product. And we will, in the afternoon, get examples of how that can be done using panel data. So in principle, once the product is on the market, there is data being generated showing the effects of the health claim or symbol on consumer choice. We may not always have access to that data. These data, they are either owned by retailers or they're part of a panel, and accessing them is sort of a costly matter, so it may not always be possible to get access to the data. The other thing is we can only do that once a product has been on the market for some time. It requires historical data, otherwise this type of analysis is not possible. So in many cases, we would like to use something else, either because the product is not yet on the market or because we have not access to that type of data. And then we have a range of other possibilities, other tools that are not quite the same as a real-world purchase, but that are more or less close to that. And a traditional way of doing that, widely used in market research, is that in a survey you ask people about their liking for the product or about their intention to buy the product. That is widely used, and for all we know, that is a kind of problematic way of doing it, because the relationship to actual purchases is not that strong. There is a relationship, but it is not that strong. So what else can we do? Well, we can, for example, measure people's liking of products without asking them. What is called implicit measures of attitude. That can be done. It avoids the social desirability bias, but is still relatively far away from an actual purchase. On the other hand, we can do choice experiments, which simulates a choice in the shop, which is much closer to the real world choice, only that it's being done in an artificial setting in a laboratory. We can measure people's attraction to the product by some physiological methods. And then we can measure people's attention to the health claim on the product by using a method called eye tracking, which allows us to see what people look at when they are confronted with a product, like, for example, on a shelf. And that, of course, measures people's attention to the information on the product. It does not measure people's choice, but we know from research in the area that people's attention and people's choice are tightly related. For that reason, eye tracking is also a promising method. And I will, in the following, say a little bit more about the role of choice experiments and eye tracking measures in relation to actual sales data, because based on the studies that our colleagues in Saarbrücken in Germany have done together with the Globus retail chain, these are the ones that are most promising in this context here. So this is the example that was used in these studies here. So it's olive oil with three types of claims: a taste claim, nutrition claim, and a health claim here. And these products were actually, in consecutive periods of time, on the shelf in the Globus retail chain in Germany, which was a partner in the project. So we had some actual sales data here, so we could use it as a benchmark to compare with the other methods that we were investigating. And in this particular case here, what it showed here is that the product with the nutrition claim attracted sort of more sales than the product with the taste claim and the product with the health claim. So this was a benchmark, and then we could compare that with the results that we achieved from the other methods. And this here shows the combination of the choice experiment with the eye tracking. So here we have a shelf in a lab setting. People were instructed to choose, in this case here, among olive oils. So people did that. And the person here has this set of glasses over here, which is the eye tracking device, which allows us to measure where people look at, how long people look at different parts on the product and that type of thing. And what the results showed was that there was a close correspondence between the choice in the choice experiment, the attention to the health claim as measured by the eye tracking, and that these two were in correspondence with the sales figures that we obtained in the real shop. So that the eye tracking measure, the choice experiment, and the real sales data as a benchmark were in correspondence. And we can see here that those people that did look at the claim at all, they were most likely to look here at the nutrition claim, were most likely to look at the claim if the claim was a nutrition claim, were much less likely to look at the claim if it was a health claim here. So the attention measure corresponds to the choice measure. And it shows that the measure of attention, which eye tracking is a predictor of the choice. Now, if we know what people look at, and if we know at how long people look at it, that actually explains to a large extent also what people will choose afterwards. So if we want to analyze the effect of the claim on the choice, it is mediated by the attention to that particular claim. Okay, so in terms of recommendations on measuring effects on purchasing, of course, the benchmark is the actual choice once the product is on the market. But as I said, in many cases that is either not feasible or not possible. In those cases where that is not feasible or possible, the use of eye tracking and choice experiments, ideally in combination, is a good way of looking at how a claim on a product will affect consumer choice once the product is on the shelf. And that goes both for industry and for regulators. Industry, of course, will mostly be interested in the sales implications here. Regulators will be more interested in whether it leads to healthier choices. But in terms of the implications for the use of methodology, they are the same. And these methods can also be used for products that are not on the market with claims that are not authorized. If you want to see how they affect consumer choice, it can be done. Finally, then, the effects on consumption. And as I said in the beginning, by effects on consumption, we mean those effects that go beyond the choice of a single product. So that could be effects on the quantity consumed of the product, or it could be all kinds of other effects related to the overall dietary intake of people. And that already sort of shows the complexity of measuring consumption effects. Because there's no lack of methods to measure people's food consumption. In nutrition, that is a routine thing to measure people's food or dietary intake. And there's a whole range of methods available from that, varying from the very complex and costly to the not quite so complex and costly. But in terms of looking at the effects of a particular health claim on consumption, the effect of one particular claim on the overall pattern of consumption is likely to be small. And for that reason, just sort of looking for effects of one particular health claim as based on an overall study on dietary intake is probably problematical. So we thought it was worth looking as an alternative at experimental studies where you manipulate the exposure to a health claim on a particular product with a view towards seeing whether that has any consumption effects. And there have been a number of studies that have looked at them, and the number of studies that are out there mostly have looked at whether the presence of a health claim on a product increases the quantity consumed. The basic argument being, if there is a health claim on a product, then people it removes some of the guilt in eating the product, and for that reason people feel licensed to eat more of that particular product. And there are a number of studies that have shown that that happens, the number of other studies that have shown no such effect. But that is the experimental approach, and the colleagues from Surrey have done an experiment like that as part of our testing procedure here in the project. So they did a baseline measure of food intakes, and they got people into the lab. They should taste a cereal product which had or did not have a health claim on it. There was observed consumption in the lab. Then there was also a follow-up measure afterwards about consumption in the particular case. This was a product with and without the health claim. This was a food diary measure that was used to monitor food intake both before and after the experimental treatment. In this case here, there were no effects found. That, of course, again, does not generalize. It doesn't show that there are not possibly effects. Of course, there couldn't be effects, but if we have a specific hypothesis and when to investigate this specific hypothesis, obviously this is what we can do. Maybe we can conduct an experiment. If we are more interested in the broader picture, whether the introduction of health claims of a particular type in a particular product category, the type of thing, if that has if you're interested in knowing whether that has an effect on the composition of the diet, then it's probably better to have an epidemiological approach where we get the broader picture, but where we will not be able probably to locate the effect of a specific health claim on a specific product. I've been concentrating in the recommendations here on the use of these tools by regulators and industry. Because we scientists, we can of course use all methods, and we all think all methods have advantages and disadvantages. So I will not go through that here. We have learned a lot also for ourselves about the usefulness of these various methods here. And if there are, for those in the room who are scientists, we'll be willing to get to talk to them about the use of methods. But I've been concentrating here on the implications for regulators and industry. Thank you.